that's a positive, right? We're kind of moving through, we're learning as we go. But today's workshop really, I just want to spend some time talking about things that I believe are working well, things that and thank you, by the way, for some of you who put questions in, and sort of, I've tried to weave in those questions into the presentation too. And of course, as Melissa said, as questions come up, please share them in the chat. We'll answer them. And then we'll also have some time at the end as well for sort of dedicated question time. So as Melissa mentioned, I work with the Ostara Group, and we work with nonprofits all over the region and really equipping them, helping them with their organizational capacity, leadership, and just being effective fundraising partners. I've been a fundraiser for my whole career. My first job in fundraising was calling alumni and asking for money at WSU as a student. And so that reality for me of sort of having been in this profession kind of when it first started and moving through to today, there's been a lot of growth and a lot of change. And so we just, our firm works to support people and meet them where they're at. And it's been really interesting because I haven't seen a client in the flesh since March. So very interesting that my business has changed and doing a lot virtually, which is really fun. Getting used to it. We work on campaigns, development, a grants arm, as well as strategy and facilitation. So first things first, I want you to stop. I want you to breathe. You take some time. You've been here today. You've got a dedicated hour and a half for yourself to listen, to participate, to share, to learn from your colleagues. Want you to be asking yourself questions, right? I mean, the biggest question right now is, what impact does the money we raise bring our organization and those we serve? It's so critical right now because as we think about what's going on in our world with the pandemic, and the social justice and equity pieces that are happening as well, and just there's many layers, right? When we think about what's going on and what's happening and how our organizations relate to it, there's many different layers right now. And so we'll talk about those layers and make sure that we sort of pull apart some of the pieces because it can get very overwhelming. And so that's the first. I want everybody to participate in the chat. I would really, let's put in there a word in the chat right now. How are you feeling about your fundraising strategy right now? I'd love to just see kind of a baseline of how people are feeling in general today. And it may be different than yesterday, but I'd love to. Uneasy, yeah, anxiety, uncertain, a little confused, stressed, yeah, certainly. Not sure, yeah, that's fair, Karina, that's fair. Uncomfortable, okay. Anybody else when they think about how they're feeling about their fundraising strategy right now? Okay, so that's fair, and that's all real, right? And I think right now as fundraisers, it's our job to really triage in a way and to what's most important, what's second most important, what's third most important. And whether we are a team of one or a team of two or a team of many, we also have different partners. And so that's why, first things first for me is don't make any decisions alone. Make them as a team. And so when I'm thinking about who's on your team, that could be one person, that could be two people. But the idea is that it's just not you by yourself burdening the uneasiness, burdening the confusion, burdening the stress, burdening the uncomfortable factor. It's much easier, as we know, with people around us, right? And I want you to sort of think about this for a second and just, jot it down somewhere in the notes, or if you're taking notes on the computer, whatever. Who would you say are sort of your top two team members right now, if you've spent some time thinking about it? I want you to leave today not feeling alone. And I want you to leave today feeling like maybe you call those two people up, you guys get a call, you do something together in the next 2 weeks, and you talk about it together. Because it's the worst feeling in the world right now to just kind of be alone in all these emotions. So I'd love it if anybody wants to just kind of come off mute and share who's on your team. Do you have a team right now? And who's been part of sort of your team? And you can share in the chat as well. You have board members? Hand raise if anybody's got board members on their team. Yeah. Okay. Great. Board members are great. I mean, yep. Sana, thank you. Board members. How about other staff? Program staff, executive director. Yep. Good. Okay. Great. All right. So you have a team. That makes me feel happy. I don't want you to be by yourself. 2 board members, the founding director, and me. Great. Thanks, Hannah. Okay. So what's next? Well, it's really, as I mentioned, about prioritization at this point in my mind. And so determining what is critical, right? So what is critical and thinking about things in 3-month increments. So if you're thinking about next end of year campaign, put that somewhere kind of in the back of your brain for a little bit. It's still important and you're still going to need to plan for it. But I want you really to be thinking sort of August, September, October. And why I'm saying that is because there's going to be things that come up that you're just going to need to spend some time with. And when you think about those of you who had development plans, and those development plans now are probably out the window, right? Whether they were a Word document, an Excel document, doesn't matter what it was, what it looked like. That the fact is that most people's development plans in the last 4 months have just been sort of, where do we start? So making a 3-month development plan. And what I mean by that is really sort of looking at sort of the who, the what, and the how, right? I want you to be thinking about who are the people that are closest to you right now. Those are the people that we need to be focused on in our fundraising efforts. Acquisition, if you're lucky, some of you might serve in human and social services. I'm working with a food bank right now. Their gifts are up 400%, right? They're a beneficiary of what's going on in a way. People are noticing them and they're doing a great job of bringing them in, saying thank you and talking about the programs, but that's not going to last forever. And also just sort of go back to who's closest to you. Who are the people that gave in the last year who haven't yet given this year? I was working with a client this week and we were talking about just go month by month if it's that easy to prioritize and to think about who gave to you last August or last July who haven't yet given to you this year, right? However you feel comfortable sorting through and looking at your data, what I'm trying to encourage you to do is just to prioritize and to find the people that are closest to you. And I mean, when I talk about donors kind of in this presentation, I'm talking about individuals, foundations, corporations, and government. I'm talking about the whole sort of spectrum. Because right now, foundations are just as important as individuals, right? And sometimes for some of us, even more. So in general, there's a relationship manager or a program officer, right? Melissa or somebody is behind the scenes helping with grants. And so making sure that you have touched base with those foundations, making sure you've touched base with those corporations. We'll talk about sort of what to say and how to say it, but most of all, just another thing of tasks, sort of thinking of things you can actually walk away with at 12:30 with some things to do. Who's your team? Who are the people closest to you? And then, don't be paralyzed for too long. I mean, it's really easy to just feel overwhelmed, as I said, right? And that's okay. And that's real. And I'm not saying, buck up, camper, let's move on, right? I mean, there's a moment to sort of gather yourself, but then there's also the opportunity to sort of get a short-term plan, work the plan, and then figure out what comes next so that it doesn't become this overwhelming sense. Now, we'll talk about events a little bit more specifically. So in the 3-month plan, you might be talking about your event that's going to happen in the fall or maybe early next year, that's okay. And that's what I mean about sort of the prioritization. But be thinking about it sort of in terms of, do you have a summer appeal that you want to do? Do you have a donor event on Zoom that you want to bring people together for, to meet your executive director and talk about your programs? Like, that's what I mean in terms of bringing some people closer. Let donors make their own decisions. That's the other thing. I have, Melissa, and I don't remember, did we share the Joan Gary Chronicle of Philanthropy article? And if we didn't, I think we'll share it in the follow-up with the slides and some other articles. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. Yeah, I do believe I shared, I can't remember the name of the authors, but I did share 2 different articles.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect.
So I don't know who's read them, who hasn't, but yeah.
Great, thank you. So yeah, it's the one from the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and it's titled How to Ask for Money During a Crisis, and it's by Joan Gary. It's a really good article. And it's actually, what I've been doing is kind of bookmarking some of these articles and just kind of going back, not only just for motivation for me, for example, to remind myself that it's okay to let donors make their own decisions. And so, you know, when you, and of course, I don't know exactly every word that you shared and kind of what's underneath that word. There's a lot of layers there, but I know there's been some people who've been uncomfortable about asking for money right now. Because their organization isn't on the front line in the healthcare, or they're not in the front line serving, you know, social justice and equity organizations specifically. But if you think about your mission, if your mission was critical in January, your mission is still critical now. And that is just something you have to remind yourself and your board and your teams about, because it is important to know that, yes, there are some signs that fundraising is going down, and that people are choosing to support maybe 5 organizations instead of 10, or 3 organizations instead of 5. But the ones that are communicating, and the ones that are continuing to tell their story about their relevancy and why they're important now, are the ones that are going to continue to come out of the other side of this healthy and better, and probably a little bit worse for the wear too, right? I'm not totally Pollyanna about it, but I do think it's really important to let donors make decisions for themselves, which means if you send an ask, they'll decide whether they want to give or not. If you don't send the ask, they can't give. And you're signaling to your donors that you don't see importance in the work that you are doing. And so making sure that you continue to let donors, and then focusing on time, talent, and treasure, right? We talk about that often. Time, volunteers, right? There's probably some of your volunteer programs you've had to shore up or to make smaller, but there's functions for people to give time right now. And of course, there's the talent piece, right? Maybe graphic designing, website, social media. You might need support in those areas, marketing, communications. And then there's obviously the treasure piece, which is the gift piece, right? So one of the things to focus on right now in terms of what fundraising engagement looks like, we often always just focus on the money piece, which is important because we need the money to actually execute in our mission. But what do things look like right now for people who don't have money? Is there a place for them to connect with us in time? Is there a place for them to connect with the talent? And again, if you're focusing on the people that are closest to you, you will be able to work through that together. So in terms of communications, I just want you to talk with people, let them lead, right? I want you to share the story. I think adapting your messaging right now, when I talk about it, sort of the short-term and the long-term messages, is your short-term is sort of what is happening right now with your response and your living in the space around COVID. What does your programming look like? What have you adapted? What have you changed? What are you continuing to do? Because so many of our organizations are doing really amazing work right now and changing the way they completely operate and do their programming. They're doing things more virtually. There's a lot that you all are doing to share with donors and your constituents about how you are adapting your programming. And what you're doing there is you're showing people who care about you that you can be nimble. And I'm going to use that word, that you can pivot, right? Like that you're showing people that you Again, you might have been, oh my gosh, what are we doing? How do we do this? But then you sat down, you got your team, you thought about things, and then you're communicating. What are you doing to maintain your services, right? Again, communicate that to people, and then just being there unconditionally, right? I mean, remember this, as much angst as you're feeling, your donors and the people that support you are feeling the same angst. They don't not want to, that's a double negative. They want to continue to give you money, right? It's not their choice that something happened and they lost their job, or something's happening where they can't support you. But being there unconditionally for people in those communications, telling stories, making sure that people feel connected to the work that you do. And I put this in here, but local restaurants and other closed businesses, we're kind of more open depending on where you are in the county and the state, different phases. But they've been doing some good job in their messaging in terms of kind of keeping people along. And I've noticed on the restaurant front, right? They're doing a really good job of sort of keeping me close, keeping me updated, what's going on. And that's what I mean, is just thinking through, what creative and innovative measures are you taking right now? And then it doesn't have to be a list of 10, right? Don't get overwhelmed by that piece. Think about it from the aspect of 1 or 2 different things that you're doing that you are then communicating to donors. Now, there's been a question of sort of how often, right, should you be communicating? I think a lot of what we're seeing and what I'm seeing is, if you were an organization that communicated monthly before, I think communicating monthly now. If you were an organization, just continue with the cadence that you've been doing. And there's probably some audiences where you'll want to communicate more. That might be volunteers, that might be board members. So when you're thinking about your segments of your communications, think about it from the aspect of who needs to know what, and coming up with those messages, but just making sure that you are communicating with people. There was a time there kind of in the beginning, was working through some of this with clients where they had just not talked to anybody at all. And it'd been a month, it'd been 2 months, because they didn't know what to do and they were in that paralyzed, right? But I want you to feel comfortable continuing to share the stories that you have. So who do you connect with, right? You've got your Give Local donors. You've got donor advised fund donors. So some of you might be beneficiaries of donor advised funds, probably are through the Community Foundation and through others. But those donors have given that money and it needs to be given away, right? And so there is a relationship that donor advised fund holders have where they need to give that money away. And so if there's a way in which you understand in your database, whether it's 4 or many who are in your database, making sure that you can just kind of know, again, I'm talking about constituencies. You've got your Give Local donors, you might have donor advised fund donors, and their message specifically, again, can be, you have a donor advised fund, we'd love to have a conversation with you about a gift this year, about what we're doing, but be comfortable sort of, again, segmenting that group and speaking to that group of donor advised fund holders. And then your top donors, right? Run a reporting of last year's donors and sort by amount and work your way through the list, right? So look at your fiscal year from past, run that now, see who's given, see who hasn't given, and just work your way through the list. I mean, that's the other piece of just sort of taking these bits and pieces that you can do now and sort of control. And one of those things for most of you, and I leave top donors, I don't put a dollar amount there because for every organization, it's different. Your top donor might be someone who gives $10 a month, right? And they have for the last several years. Your top donor might be someone who gives $1,000 a month or a year. So define sort of for yourself, who are your top donors, and just making sure that you're keeping those people close to you. We talked about institutional and foundation donors, certainly corporate donors. Corporate donors, they're in a really difficult place right now. Again, they feel just as bad as you do. And again, when I think about corporate donors, I really focus on that time and talent piece, because thinking about when we talk about events and ways to creatively recognize sponsors during times like this, when we're not together in a room, but when we're sort of in this Zoom room together, or YouTube, whatever the platform is, there's ways in which you can thank your corporate donors and still involve them in being connected and feeling good about giving. And some of them might have really good social media following, or they might have a newsletter that they do to the people that they communicate with. Let's just say, I'm just going to pick an organization, but the Crisis Clinic of Thurston in Madison County. So Marissa. So maybe Marissa has a corporate partner who can't give you all the money right now that you used to get from them, but they have a really good newsletter and they have a really good social media following, and you could write up some bits for them to include in their newsletter about you and your organization. That's a way of increasing education, increasing awareness about who you are. It might not be directly connected to money right now, but figuring out creative ways to connect with your corporate donors. And of course, lapsed donors, right? People who have given in the previous years and not this year. And usually what I like to do is, and right now specifically, following along on that sort of keeping the people that are closest to you, I would look at sort of the last 3 years, right? Sometimes I say 5 years, but because we're such sort of an unknown time, people that have given to you in the last 3 years know you've somewhat communicated with them. They've been part of what you have accomplished. And so making sure that they're close to you. So as much as I said, last year's donors and run it and sort it, there's another piece of that I would look at your last 3 years donors as well, and making sure, again, those are the people that you're communicating with. Any thoughts or questions? It's kind of a good moment. Is there any questions we want to put in the chat, or anything around sort of the who to connect with, or the communication piece, before we kind of move into more strategies for revenue? And feel free to put it in the chat, or you can come off mute and ask. That's fine. We're a small group, and I think Melissa and I were prepared to do either.
Yeah, I don't have any in the chat right now. Oh, there's one.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have, our sponsors treated the same as corporate donors?
Oh, that's a great question, Karina. Here's what I would say to that. I think donors are individuals, all donors. So they're foundations, individuals, corporations. And so what I would say, Karina, is to have conversations with your sponsors. And I'd encourage you to have conversations with your corporate donors and just talk about what they need, right? Talk about what they're interested in learning about the organization, what's important to them about the relationship. And so therefore that sort of then determines whether when you treat people sort of similarly, or that you have sort of those individual sort of stewardship plans for each of your donors. But I would certainly think sponsors and corporate donors fall in a similar category right now, because specifically sponsors who sponsored your events in the past may or may not be able to do that. But again, if they can't give you money, can they give you airspace on social media? Can they include you in a newsletter, right? So I think treating them similarly, but still realizing that everybody has kind of their individual relationship with you is most important. Good question. Great. Thanks for the thumbs up. I like that. Okay, so strategies for revenue. And again, just keep asking the questions. I see them too. Melissa sees them. If there's anything that sparks in your mind, we're going to have dedicated time at the end too. But my style, if we were all in a room, we'd be talking and having questions. And so, okay. So strategies for revenue. So you're leaning into your Give Local donors, right? I mean, that group of people care about you. They, as we will talk about probably in our August session, I'll be coming back to talk about Give Local specifically. But Live Local donors shouldn't just give local, right? They should be coming to your events. They should be giving end of year. They should be giving special asks. we should be taking them on an annual basis and bringing again them closer to us and making sure that we're asking them in different ways to support us. Spring appeals, sort of spring and summer appeals now. One of the things, I follow a bunch of people on Twitter. I read a lot online, and direct mail and the phone are not dead, right? Like there were times when we thought that maybe those were pieces that were kind of going away, but especially now, since we're at home, people are appreciating letters. And so have you done a letter in a while? Maybe do a letter, right? And maybe pick a segment, maybe not a huge swath, but pick a segment of people again to ask them for a gift via letter. Couple quick things. One, make it personal. Make it Dear Melanie, Dear Rebecca. Don't make it Dear Friend. I know there's a question of capacity sometimes, but with mail merge and some of the tools that we have, you're more likely to get a relationship or connection with someone if you connect with them personally. And then the other piece is ask them for a specific gift, right? So maybe look at what their last gift was and import that into the letter and ask them to give that gift again. So be specific. And as much as you can, be specific about a program too, knowing that our goal is to get unrestricted dollars, right? That's always going to be my priority for you all, to pay salaries, to keep the lights on, to do all of that. But there's ways in which we can tell our stories about what we're doing, to be specific, but ask for general funds. The phone and the email tree. I mean, I think, again, right now, people, again, we tend to project our angst on other people. If you don't like phone calls, you probably don't like calling people. But I will tell you, people are answering the phone. And so I know organizations where they have those top donors, and the ones that have phone numbers, they've just been working their way down the list. They've invited board members to participate, and they basically just call and say, how are you? It's checking in on people right now. Again, be there unconditionally, right? We want them to give. That's important. But they're also people that care about us, and we care about them. So how are they doing? The email tree, what I mean by that is kind of, giving and divvying things up and having people communicate that come from you as a person. Text to give. So it's another, Melissa, I'm kind of jotting a little list of a couple follow-up things, but there's a new report out, actually just recently. It's it's a benchmarks report on sort of social media, texting to give, marketing, and it's not just big organizations, it's also small organizations. So I'll include that link. Maybe when you're all in breakout rooms, I'll put that link in the chat. But one of the things I found really interesting about it was that texting is growing exponentially, okay? And there was a whole conversation, a podcast that I listened to. It's called Marketing for Good, and it's Erica Mills Barnhart. She releases a new podcast every Monday. I actually had my first podcast appearance, had never done that, but I did that with her about a couple months ago, and actually talked about fundraising during this time. But the one from this week was about this report, and it was just really interesting to listen to them talk about texting and social media. I'll give you a heads up. The 3 platforms they test are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are the most popular, and those are the ones that people are joining the most. Instagram, I think, has grown probably 30% in the last year, which I thought was really interesting. So I'm kind of a data nerd. It's a highlight report. It's not very, but it talks about, sort of confirms some of these things we're talking about and how to raise money. And then the virtual and online events, which we'll get into much more specifically in a little bit here. So I want to do a breakout room. And what I'd love to do, let's see, without Melissa and me, we have 11. I think we'll do 2 rooms. And what I would love for you to do in your room is just part of, okay, I'm here, yes, and I'm talking with you all, but there is this importance that I always believe in, sort of sourcing the knowledge in the room. And so what I want you all to do, and I'll put the questions in the chat, but I want you to we're going to get into 2 breakout rooms. I want you to talk about, what shifts to other fundraising strategies have you made? Where are you seeing success, and where are you seeing challenges? Because what I often find, and you all know this as well in participating like this, is what your success might be someone's challenge and what your challenge might be someone's success. So we're just going to spend a few minutes in the breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and share and move along. But I would love for you to just spend a little bit of time just talking about this aspect, and coming back and sharing what you learn. So let's see here. Breakout rooms. I think we're gonna do, yikes. Delete. I'm gonna do 2 rooms. I had 3, but we're doing 2. Okay, we're doing 2. And we're going to randomly assign. So what happened here? There we are.
Just a heads up, the breakout rooms won't be recorded.
Yes, perfect.
It just, the recordings just happen here in the main room.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah. Okay, so about to send you in. We'll take about 10 minutes, I think. I'll look, but I'll judge probably 7 to 10 minutes. And just have a good conversation. I'll kind of give you a kind of a minute warning. I'll put these questions in the chat, and just have a conversation. Learn from each other. What's working? What's not working? Where do you need help? And just go for it. Okay, here you go. I'm gonna whisk you away. Coming back. That magical whisk away is kind of fun to me. Okay. I would love to just hear, what did you all talk about? What's going on for each, a couple people maybe from each group could just share some successes, some challenges, any new ideas that came out? One idea. That's all I'm looking for. One idea.
Rebecca, I think
Yes.
what we talked about was just not being paralyzed, like
Yeah.
what you had talked about before, and just really getting out there and telling that story, and just making them know how you're pivoting during this time and still making an impact.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Melanie. One more, maybe different group. It's kind of about your conversation.
Hi. We talked about like successes we've had in communication, and then in kind of like on the outset of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like at the outset. And but I don't know, like shared some thoughts on like the challenges of the long-term communication with people.
Yeah.
Because like a point was brought up that it's like for some of our organizations, it's kind of like rebuilding from the ground up, and it takes a long time to get it right. And so it's like, what do we even tell people in the meantime, kind of question.
Yeah. Thanks, Lynn. A comment to that, Lynn, is I often find that we know what to say. We're just not sure if we should say it or not. And so if you, as long as there's sort of an authentic, transparent sort of, even we don't know what to tell you right now, even what you just said, we are looking at building this from scratch. We are making changes every month. I think that's part of it, is just to be really open and honest about where you are at. Where is your organization at? And when you've had a really great success, share that. And when there's something really not great going on, share that too. Because the other thing is, if you share always great bubbly things, there's no realness to that. And I think oftentimes the donors that we are in relationships with, part of why they're giving to you is they want to, they want a relationship, they want to give back, they want to be engaged. And so if we give them something that's a challenge and they have the opportunity to support that, there's often kind of this magic that happens, right, when you put it out there. So that's really a good topic. And also, there's no playbook for this at any level, right? And so I think we have to be really honest with ourselves and really honest with our board and our volunteers and all of our constituencies and stakeholders that we are doing the best that we can. And that there's going to be days when you are not going to want to look or do anything, and that's okay. But the next day or the day after that, you got to kind of figure it back out, right? And so again, going back to that team, who's on that team with you, how regularly are you meeting with them, and how often can you kind of walk through some of these? So that's great. Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate that comment. Anybody else? If we move along. Okay, great. So events, it's a big question, right? Some of you've already, some of you held your event, right? Some of you have had a virtual event. Can I get a show of sort of a thumbs up, or how many of you have you already had a virtual event? I don't see any. Is that right, Melissa? Do you see any? Melanie's saying kind of. Okay.
Well, it's more programming. We do have sponsorships attached to them, but it's not the sponsorships just cover the programming side of it. Okay. So, but we've tried to do it virtually to some extent, and we're holding another one this August as well, okay. Trying to build off of what we've learned back in June.
Okay, great. And Sana, it looks like you all have had an event. Do you want to just share briefly?
Yeah, no, just quickly. I had an event for a different nonprofit, not Hype, but I thought, why not share? We used a platform called Hopin.
Hopin?
Hopin. So it's Hopin. It's actually amazing. They have networking sessions. They have a main stage. It feels like you're in a real event. And so that was really cool. The turnout was amazing. And it was
I love it.
We charged for tickets. It was $25 each, but then a certain amount of people showed up, and it actually proved to be quite good. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, great. We're going to have an opportunity we're going to do Breakout Room again, because I want to talk about some things, and then for you to, because I'm sure this is a lot of it is on your mind, right? So it's really a question of what can you do that allows you to continue to bring people together, to communicate what your mission is, and to communicate what your impact is, right? And I think what we're learning is that events that we used to do are not working the same way virtually, right? Let's be honest. It's not going to work that way. So when I think about events that are working, I'm thinking about kind of the invite, right? Which has been going on for a long time. Some organizations already do that, right? Where they sort of send an invitation on invitation, and you're basically being the gala. You're inviting someone to stay at their home and eat popcorn on their couch and, read a book or do something, and not spend the money on parking and not spend the money on food out or a new baby childcare, and then asking for that gift to come to your organization. So there's kind of some creative organizations have been doing that for a while, but now more than ever, clearly the virtual online event is happening, right? And there's a lot of different ways in which you can do and host that. We'll talk about that a little bit. Again, the popcorn and pajamas, there's a lot of other creative ideas. I'm curious, and you can, again, put them into the chat, whether it's your organization, like Sana shared a different organization, but have you seen an organization do an event well? Of any sorts? Okay, so the examples that I will share, and that I'm keeping a list, right, of others, but Upaya Social Ventures, they do work in India. They did a virtual event really early, like March 13th, March 14th early. They had to make a decision quick to move from in-person to online, and they raised $70,000 above their goal, right? And so what I'm seeing more often than not are organizations that are taking the time to think through the concepts of their event and taking what's online and what's not on, like taking what I've suggested is this, and I've worked with a couple clients to just very short-term contracts where let's talk through what were the components of your event. I want you to just list them, right? All the way from a save the date to your follow-up call. And I want you to list them. And then I want you to have sort of a T-chart, and I want you to move over to the other side. What are the things that translate virtually, right? And what are the things that don't? Because what we can't do is take, again, everything that we used to do in person and put it online. And so picking it up is really important in terms of what can you really do. So Upaya, great organization. Arts Core, they're local here in the Seattle area. They did like a live and unplugged YouTube concert. People popped in, people popped out. Cancer Lifeline did kind of a 4-day event where they had kind of an ask, and they had some programming, and then they had an event at the end of the week where everybody gathered. The Center for Wooden Boats, they've done a great job in terms, they had like a week-long event. And if you go to their website, the Center for Wooden Boats, they have some information about that. And I can also send kind of a highlight reel, because they even did kind of encourage everybody to dress up, and had a sort of a champagne toast at the end of their week-long campaign. They had different staff members that were actually in the boathouse who kind of, took a tour of what's going on in this area of the boathouse. Or they had one of their board members did like a cocktail mixology class from his house, right? Something related and totally unrelated. But the idea of kind of bringing people in closer to you. And then the YES, which is Youth Eastside Services, they had a March breakfast that also exceeded their goal. So what I'm seeing is organizations that have a virtual component, that they're using it as an opportunity to expand and widen their audience. Because if you think about it, the barrier to access is much lower. There still is a barrier because people have to have access to technology that works to allow you to be in. But in terms of someone joining from their phone, someone joining, from their computer, the idea is that if you had board members that moved out of your area, if they moved out of state, I mean, I've heard many organizations who have taken, their core audience and expanded it because people that used to love them that maybe moved away, if you have a virtual event, they get to come join you, right? So there's an opportunity to actually maybe reach more people. And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing people exceeding their goals, is because they are expanding the audiences that they serve. So when I think about, and Jennifer says, the Washington Center for Performing Arts having their online virtual gala this Thursday on YouTube, free to attend, might be available to, that'd be great. Very, very valuable to attend and see how they do it. Thanks, Jennifer. My husband and I participated in one. Actually, our daughter, my stepdaughter, participates in a program called Global Visionaries, and they do youth leadership and social justice work in Guatemala. And they did a combo of some pre-recorded and a live, and they also used the YouTube platform. And I've got a couple slides later where I can share with you some different, hadn't heard about that Hop In, Sana. So I'm again collecting all these different things as well to share with others. But this is Upaya. So Upaya, again, they, their executive director, Kate, on the left, that's their auctioneer on the right. And they basically just, they're proud to announce they exceeded their goal, right? And so they came in together and celebrated together, utilizing social media really, really well. But taking your event to your people, that's what we're talking about, right? Like this idea of, I'm working with a couple people right now, organizations that had summer events or fall events. And what we're doing is we're taking the list of everybody who came to the event the last 2 years, and we're sending a letter to them, and we're saying, well, again, acknowledging, as you can imagine, we're not getting together, but we're still raising money and it's still important. And what we'd like for you to do is to have an event join us, right? So one organization did it at a beer house, and so they're asking everybody to go find a beer and to join them, and they're going to do a toast, right? And so again, getting creative about what you can do, but you can create a toolkit, which I have an example for you in a minute. You can video your speaker and you can send that to your event list. And the video doesn't have to be professional, by the way. It can be an iPod shot. In fact, the executive director of the director of development from Upaya, she shared, I watched a webinar where she talked about their event. She used a Android on a tripod. That's how they did their video, right? So it doesn't have to be budget, it can be budget neutral. It can be cheap, was what I'm saying, and still be a really good delivery. Sending your event collateral, you still have that, right? Whether it's in person or it's online, I mean, like a physical program that you might have put at each person's, send that with a little personal note that says, we missed you. We'd love for you, to make a gift. This is what our goal is. And then calling and talking with your sponsors. Again, figuring out how they can continue to participate with you. Actually, I have this. So Heritage University, they're over in Yakima. They did a box. And they sent this box to they have a scholarship dinner. And they sent the box, and inside the box, basically they included a bid number that someone could use. They included a giving envelope, and they included a program. So they included their program. And what they did was they just put everything in a box and sent it to people. And they encouraged people to take selfies with their little bid number. And they had a live component. And, that's Heritage University in Yakima. And they, again, exceeded their goal. And because what they're doing is they're taking their event to their people, right? So figuring out how they can bring the event to people and continue to do that. So here are a couple online auction sites. GiveSmart, there are also auction and other mobile bidding sites. GiveSmart, Fundraise. I don't know if there's others, please put them in the chat if you know of others. But you can use, using auction items that you can use as incentives. You got to check state laws for that, but there's a way that you can get creative in using, and then offering content or a panel at the event. So I have a client right now, and I'm talking, this is a fundraising event that we've kind of been talking about, but I have one organization that's having a monthly coffee chat, 30 minutes with the executive director virtually, just talking about what's going on with programs. And sometimes they're getting 10 people, and sometimes they're getting 40 people, but there's a lot of opportunity. I know there's some people from the symphony, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to look it up in a second, but what is it called? I'm not going to come up with it, but anyway, it's an orchestra group, symphony group, and they also recently did one where they had their musicians involved and had their musicians play a piece and just invited people to listen, right? And of course, it's not the same quality, it's not the same feeling, but they're, bringing art into people's lives through this medium has definitely been something that people have appreciated. So the toolkit. So what I'm talking about, a toolkit, is for those of you who've had events where you've had table captains, right? Or people that have been guiding your events in the past, create a toolkit for them and send that to them. And again, invite them to still be the virtual table captain that they are. So putting some frequently asked questions in, putting communication templates in there, and being very specific about what you want their role to be. And, if you want to think about starting with just simple, start with your board, right? Start with a component of your board. Or think about who have been your champions in the past at your event and bringing a group of those people together. And launch like this. Have a virtual sort of table captain celebration event where you're bringing people together and you're talking about their role and you're talking about what you want them to do. But there's a way in which you can bring people together, again, virtually, give them tools, and then they can be a champion on your behalf. So what I love about that is it's great to hear from an organization, but it's better if I hear it from Lynn, right? It's better if I hear it from Sana, because then I am intrigued because I know Lynn and I want to know more about her organization. And so I'm thinking, that's interesting. So again, I like this idea of creating mini champions within your organization. And whether it's you've had a table captain event in the past and it's easy to translate that, or it's volunteers, board, past board, pull together sort of a peer-to-peer toolkit. So what I'd like to do is a quick breakout room, because I want you to be able to get in a group and just talk about events, right? I want you to talk about if you've shifted. Some of you, most of you have not done. What are you talking about? What do you need support with? And just sort of, again, maybe make a connection. Someone might be working on something, platforms, ideas. Just spend a couple minutes just thinking about this in terms of what it might be. So we want to end about 12:15. We might go till 12:20, but we'll give about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll come back. And so what I'm going to do is put you into breakout rooms again. And let's see. Melissa, I'm going to take you out. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to split you all up, and then we'll go from there. Okay, see you soon. Melissa, you could just not join. I couldn't figure out how, but
yeah, no, I just declined it.
you won't lose points.
Oh, that's good. I was worried about it.
Great. Okay, so we'll come back about 5 minutes, just have like 2 slides left, and then we can have 10 minutes of questions. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Tanika,
Right.
are you able to get into the breakout rooms?
I don't know if Tanika joined the other one either. I maybe. I'm gonna get some water. Melissa, I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna step away as well.
Welcome back. Oops, that's the wrong one. Okay. Couple ideas. Love to hear. Who is planning an event right now? Thumbs up. And how's that going? So Lynn, so. Anybody else? Any other platforms or successes that you've seen that you would share, or that you talked about? I think what's really important is, events have a place. They are a place for us to acquire new donors. They're a place for us to bring people together to learn about what we do. And there's also a place to celebrate and to bring people together to celebrate. And I think what this is doing is really focusing us to reevaluate where events fit into our fundraising strategy, and how do we continue to focus on other different strategies like Give Local, like annual appeals, like phone-a-thons, like email campaigns. One of the things I'll share, that event for Global Visionaries was online, but they also were hopeful, and who knows what's going to happen now, but they were hopeful that there would be a in-person component in August. And so part of what they did was, it was free to join the event, but they had a ticketed feature where we could buy a ticket to get together in August. So again, that combo virtual in person, and I kind of think it remains to be seen what happens. with what we don't know. But the idea of having, I've talked to a lot of people who have had so much success with the online virtual that they will most likely continue an online and a virtual component in a post-COVID world. And so how will they incorporate kind of the in-person and the virtual together? I think continues to be a question that people talk about, which will be interesting. So it'll be interesting to sort of see what comes of this. So as we kind of move to a close, you know, there's the Fundraising School. They're out of the Lilly School of Philanthropy out of Indiana. And they do great webinars. They have a whole sort of history of them that you can go on. And they did one on an events most recently that was just dedicated to events. And that's where the Upaya Director of Development shared that story about the Android on the tripod. But Dr. Tim Seiler is the director of the school. And I listened to one really early on, and I think it still means a lot now, is that what people really want, you know, are hope and stability. And so, you know, as we think about this, I want you to be thinking about what does it look like on the other side of this? What does it look like for your organization? What does it look like for the people who are part of your community? What have conversations? What's happened is there's been a huge kind of awakening of what's working and what's not working. And where do our organizations fit into that? Where can we be helping create the new future? And so one of the things I want you to encourage you to do is just to dream big. And what would you love to do because of this? And how could your mission support that? And, you know, tell that story now and get people excited and have them dream with you, right? And I think that's hard. You know, Melanie, you were talking about in that first breakout room, once you sort of get beyond the paralyzed, once you get beyond the like, I can't even do this until next week, right? But honestly, promise me you'll give yourself 90 minutes in the next 2 weeks and just put it on your calendar, dream big, right? What does it look like for your organization to dream big? And because people will give to support big ideas. And especially if you are bringing your community into it and centering your community and having conversations with them about their needs and talking about the people that you raise money from, what are their needs, and kind of making this amazing, you know, opportunity out of something that's been very, very difficult for many of us, very personally and professionally in so many ways. So these are just a couple of resources that I come across. Again, Melissa will share these slides. I put another article in the chat. Julia Campbell, she's based out of Boston. She does some really good work around social media and marketing. Karina, I'm seeing you shake your head. Yeah, she's just awesome. And she had this whole article on sort of thanking corporate sponsors and 20 ways to thank corporate sponsors for virtual events. Really practical, easy ways, right? And again, even if we don't ever do a virtual event again, there's still an idea in there. And so how can we sort of be pulling out these ideas? And just some, you know, a couple things to remember, that since the 1980s, there's been 5 recessions, right? And now we're in our 6th. And that philanthropy and giving has actually continued to grow overall, kind of the trajectory, right? Now we know that giving to some organizations and will go down, and that is happening right now, and people will choose to give less money. But the overarching sort of since the 1980s, and it's again, the reminders to ourselves that we will get through this and what does the other side look like is really important. So we will get through this. Lean into your mission and your impact. Communicate, right? Where's the next good idea? Just talk to people, talk to your team. Relationship-based fundraising is something that has always been and will always be. And because we cannot be with each other face to face, that will happen again. But in the meantime, emails work, virtual meetings work, phone calls work. That is going to be your best bet. And again, focusing on those people closest to you, most important, and getting your board involved too, very much. What's the board's role in this? And how can I always see board as an extension of your staff, whatever size staff you have. One person, even if you have a volunteer, it's not considered a paid staff position, but volunteers and board members are an extension. And then really specifically about the event, and it's about this anyway, it's never really about the event. It's about the people who benefit from the event, and it's about the impact, and it's about that story. And we all have really good stories. And so picking out one or two of those, and, you know, making sure that, again, there's a very important movement right now in how we tell stories, and making sure that people have advocacy over their stories, and making sure that we're not just telling someone's story, but bringing them into the storytelling process, and using that as an opportunity to really communicate what your organizations do. So continue to be positive, continue to be overwhelmed on some days, and be really thinking about what the other side looks like. So I know we have about 8 minutes or so. We've done some questions along the way, and if there's questions in the chat, or if someone wants to stick around and ask some specific questions, I'm here. Melissa will be here till 12:30. But thank you for taking that time to join today, and to be thinking about heart for you too, Lynn. Thank you. Really appreciate you all, and I'm available as a resource. I'll kind of close your eyes. I'm going to be going back really fast, and that might make someone sick. Here I am. My email's not there, but Melissa will give it to you. That's me on Twitter. And I want to be a resource. So, you know, if there's a question you have, I'm going to be coming back in August. We're going to be talking specifically about Give Local, but if I can be helpful, I'm here. So what did we not talk about? What are questions that you have? Source the group. And if you need to leave, that's great too. Thank you for joining. Bye, Lynn. About Facebook events. Ooh. Yeah, please. Yeah.
And this is just, we're looking at a Facebook event that would last the entire month.
Okay.
So we did a Facebook event in June, but it was clunky because Facebook will only allow you 2 weeks at a time, or you can do specific like dates, like you can have specific dates that you designate. But I believe they fall off as soon as you have that first date, it falls off your current events and goes into past events. So I was just wondering what that best practice might be. Like, do you just put it at the end of the month and just say things are happening throughout the entire month, and posting updates to that event throughout? Because I don't want to lose, I want all the people that join that event to still get all of that information, but I want it as a current event still, that people sign up and be, you know, interact with.
Check the going and that whole thing versus.
Yeah.
That's a good question, Millie. I mean, I think so much of it is about content and drawing people back, and sort of leaving the breadcrumbs from one piece of the event to the next piece of the event to the next piece of the event to the next. And so as much as you can in your event, the actual form that people join or are interested in, kind of in that section, you can describe what to expect, right? Well, we're going to post weekly content on Tuesdays. You know, make sure to giving people kind of expectations and kind of bringing them along in that way. I think helps with those longer events. And then the other thing is that toolkit idea, right? Is having people invite people to the event, and outside of Facebook, you know, Melissa might email me and just be, you know, midway through and just say, making sure you've checked in on the Facebook event, you know, and reporting back successes, reporting back stories. And, you know, depending on your level of content, you know, you could post every day, right? You could post every other day. If your content, but only do as much as your content allows you to do, right? That's what I would say. Is that helpful?
I think so. And I think potentially leaving it to the end of the month
Yeah.
would be the best. And
I
then,
think so.
like you said, posting throughout and
Yep.
making it clear what that event is all about.
Yep. Just tell them how you're keeping it open, what it looks like, you know, explaining to people, because they don't know that those ins and outs, right? That you know from the back end side. So just communicating that with people, I think, is really important. And actually that study, that M&R study, that link I put in, they talked a lot about Facebook events and that it's growing, right? And that it's most successful where the most successful ones are where, like, I would have a birthday party to support your cause, right? So yes, the organization, again, having an event on Facebook, still working, but the fastest growing piece of it is where your champions are helping you and driving traffic to your organization through their own Facebook events.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely. Other thoughts, questions?
And I just had a side note, that link
please.
that you talked about for the 25 ways to recognize sponsors.
Yes.
Did you say that was in the chat, or is that coming through
chat?
something?
Yep, it's in the chat, and it's the one that says, it's just about 3-4 chats ago. It says, great article on recognizing sponsors in a virtual world. And Melissa, maybe what you'll do is take the articles out of chat, and maybe we can just include one follow-up email that has the slides and then those articles. Does that work? Or I can send them to you, whatever we want to do.
Yeah, no, I can do that.
Okay, perfect.
And is everyone else seeing that? Because I don't see that in the chat box for some reason.
So you don't see it either. No one can see it.
It says it's to everyone.
Hang on, let me just
So,
do it. Do you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. There you go. Great. And then the other, yeah. And Sana, thank you for that hop in. If Sana, so yeah, I'm interested to learn about that. That's great. Yeah. Another, that Give Butter. I crack up when I say that out loud, but a lot of people like that platform. It's been great. What else is on your mind? Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wish we would have?
I think it's also the storytelling at these live events. I know I've seen a bunch of other organizations bringing together videos, and you just kind of walking that back from the very beginning. How does that look for an organization that's never done that before? And I know it doesn't have to be high budget, but like just telling that, I feel like that story is very important on how you pull it together. So that would be helpful in the future as well.
Okay, that's great. I like the word pilot, Melanie. So anytime for like a small organization who's never done that, maybe pick not your annual event or like the big event, but pick one of those smaller monthly events, practice some video, see how it goes, work it into the format. And again, go back to that story of what is your greatest story? Why do people care about you, right? When I do strategic planning with organizations, we talk about what are you first at, only at, best at. And it's not a bragging thing, but it's a place that people to come from the bright spots, right? And to be able to share and then connect stories to those things. What are you first at? What are you best at? What are you only at? And you can, it's meant to get people brainstorming in a place of abundance of where you're strong and strength, and then tell stories from that place. Definitely. Well, hopefully y'all saw, I put my email in the chat. Hopefully that got there. Did you guys see that? Yes? Okay, great. Okay, so my email's in there. We'll follow up with the slides. We'll follow up with some articles. Hopefully we'll see you next month. And in the meantime, you're doing a lot. I know you are. So thank you for what you're doing for your organizations, for the people that you work with. that benefit from your impact. So thank you.
Thanks
All
everyone
right.
for coming. Yeah, and feel free to, if you do have any more like questions, or there's a thought that you have later on, feel free to either email Rebecca or myself, and we will get that answer to you as soon as possible.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks to the foundation for doing these. It's really important.
Yeah, thanks for working with us, Rebecca.
Okay.
We'll see you
Bye,
next
everybody.
time.
Ciao,
Bye,
ciao.
everyone.